Okay, hello everybody. Hello Charlie. How are you?
I'm very good. Yeah, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's bit of a mixed bag weather-wise, but we're ready for week 35 of Makeover Monday.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's good on YouTube, so I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Now you'll have to tell us a bit more about this cricket thing that you've dreamed up here. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it was popular with Andy, so I watched him wrestling with it yesterday. Honestly, this was just a Google search for bad charts, and it was one of the most recent ones that came up. And I think I said on the tweet when I shared it, I said that this more or less epitomizes everything I hate about overuse of graphics on charts because they had no real value in this case.
Yeah.
So it's a very simple data set where I felt actually the use of the graphics was just clutter, and I wanted to see how people would react to it because in my dreams I hoped for a series of simple charts, clutter free, and we'll see if my dream was realized today.
Well, and we can be a bit sneaky like that, right? We like to throw something out there, fully knowing probably what's going to happen, still having hope it's not going to happen, but just seeing what have people listened to over the past months or 5 years, and are they going to resist temptation? And you've put together a collection for us on Twitter with going through the hashtag and seeing what people have created. So we'll go through that. I can see a couple of comments. Hi Raina and hi Ravi. Great to have you here. And Michelle is able to join live as well. So we'll move over from our faces to the actual collection on Twitter. And I had just maybe I'll just firstly start with the viz again, just to remind people. So that was the original. And I have to admit I haven't done mine yet because my cricket knowledge is probably about as much as as intense or in depth as my curling knowledge or whatever else sport that I really have no contact with. So I'm curious to see what people do today and what I can learn from that before I create my own, especially understanding it. So that's the chart, and do you want to start at the top or the bottom of the collection?
I think if we go to the bottom, because that was the first or the earliest submission, so if we get through those, I think it's a reward for submitting early.
Okay, sounds good. And for those people who did submit with the hashtag and who don't have their viz reviewed, please don't think we don't want to or we ignored it or something. We can't cover them all, but across all of these vizzes that Charlie put together, you will find something that's similar to yours, and you can probably use our feedback to apply to your own viz. So please do that. So we'll start with Evailo. Evailo?
Yeah, yes, I'll go with how you said it.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, so as a reminder, we just had 5 Indian cricket batsmen and a couple of metrics for both of them. So batting average, which is just across a course of matches, if you add up all the runs they score and divide it by the number of matches they played in, what was their average score? And then dismissals is literally just how many times were they bowled out, caught out, or whatever. And it's specifically looking at those metrics against bowlers who bowl quickly and bowl with their left arms. So it's a bit niche, but it's simple. So in this case, we've got...
Sorry that I laugh, but when you said it's simple, I'm still trying to understand the explanation of just batting averages. So can you maybe take one short step back and just quickly explain those metrics again? So sorry, dismissals, what that is, and what someone's batting average is. Like you I don't know, you mentioned a couple of terms and I'm still trying to figure out what they actually mean.
Okay, cool. So this article came out last year. So there was the Cricket World Cup last year, and India were going to play Australia, and at that time India didn't have a very good record against Australia. So this article came out to sort of say, what sort of things can India try to take on board that will help them win against Australia? And one of the challenges the Indian team faced was they didn't have domestically, so in the Indian League, they don't have any fast bowlers that use their left arm to bowl. So because it's like in any sport, if you've got no experience against a particular type of opponent, then it becomes difficult to face it. So all of these stats were basically saying, how do our top Indian batsmen at the moment perform against the main threat of the Australian bowling attack? So for the batting average, it's basically saying in all matches that these guys have played against fast bowling left arm bowlers, if we add up all their runs, how many runs did they score? And if we divide that by the number of matches they played against those people, on average, how many runs would we expect them to score against that sort of bowler?
So batting average, you want the number to be high. That's a good thing?
That's a good thing, yes.
Okay.
So what this lacks, and what Andy was trying to look for yesterday, was we don't know how many matches. So if one of these guys has got an average of 100, but that could just be one match. It could be like a fluke. And then the next guy's got an average of 60-something, but he might have averaged that over the course of 20 matches. So maybe he's more consistent. So that's the only thing the data lacks, is that context of over what period of time were they getting these averages, if that makes sense.
And what's a run in cricket?
It's just a point.
Okay.
That's all it is. So hit the ball. If you run between the wickety bits once, that's one run. And then there's lots of other ways to get points, but it's kind of irrelevant.
Because they do run back and forth, right? So if they run like 3 times, it's 3 runs on one
go.
Go?
And if they don't fancy running, they can just hit it harder, and then they can just get it to hit a rope or go over a rope, and then they get even more runs. So that's cricket.
Okay, and last question before before we actually look at this viz, what's the significance of left arm bowling?
It's just I'm trying to think of so if you it's kind of hard to articulate, but if you imagine that you're playing any sport, but we use cricket as an example. If you're right-handed, you'll stand with the bat in a certain position when you're waiting for the bowler to throw a ball at you.
Yeah.
And if that bowler throws with their left arm, it means that the trajectory of the ball is different to if someone was bowling with the right arm at you.
Yeah.
And in general terms, more people are right-handed than left. So in most sport, if you've got a left-handed batter or a left-handed bowler, they almost have an advantage, because if you're bowling at a left-handed batter, you've got to do it in a slightly different way to normal. So maybe your own bowling becomes less effective. And if you're batting against a left-handed bowler, which you might have less experience against, again, your batting might be less effective because it's a less common thing. So that's the whole nuance of a left versus right-handed thing. And it's probably the same in baseball and other sort of batty, bally sort of games.
Okay. I mean, even tennis, right? I mean, that's a very simple one for me to understand. But okay, good. I think that's all my questions. Let's focus on the viz. What do you think of this one?
So I think it's almost like a logical step where if you've got something with 2 metrics that you try and do a scatter plot to see what's going on. I think it's because there's so few data points, I don't know that it's massively insightful in this case. So it at least allows us to see that Virat Kohli's got a very high batting average. So you can see him all the way over on the right, and he stands out almost as an outlier. And you can see that Jadhav has got a very low dismissal rate, so he's very low down on the y-axis. So it lets you visualize the data, but I always look at scatter plots as a way to look at proper trends. So you look for clusters and stuff like that. I think it's probably not the best chart choice for such a sparse data set.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And I don't mind the use of color here because they are quite far apart from each other and each is obviously a person. But I'm not sure. It doesn't tell me anything. And I think even if I knew more about cricket, I would be left with, okay, so what? Because there's a title, there's a subtitle, but there is zero description of what this actually is meant to tell me or what this shows.
Yeah, I think that was a general. So I was watching Twitter. There's a general confusion about what these metrics are. But it's similar to me when I get American sports. I got no idea what's going on with any of those. So it's just a different way of giving people a challenging bit of data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought I was starting to get the hang of some little fraction of American sports, and then lockdown happened and they, stopped playing, and suddenly I've got nothing to learn from. So, okay, shall we move on to Siddharth's viz?
Yeah.
Which has got a few pictures. Now, I see there's a little bit of chatter going on, but feel free, people, to say hello to each other in the live chat and see who else is there and how they are, and maybe people can share where they're dialing in from on this fine Wednesday. So, okay, what this viz tells me is what people look like, or what these players look like. The rest, I'm not really sure. So, Indian batsman versus left arm pace. I have to admit, that title in the first place, I find really confusing, because how can it be a person versus left arm pace? Like, what is that even? What does that even mean? Yeah, so I don't get that bit. I would just update the title to something a bit more sensible.
Yeah, so this is interesting to see this one. So if I'm in like constructive feedback mode, I think this actually makes the data harder to read than the original. So
yeah.
The thing that annoyed me with the original was having you remember there was these variable sized batsman images standing around, and the one thing that at least had in its advantage was I think their bats all reached the same or the right position relative to the batting average. But here you've got such tall icons for the batsman that actually, and without an axis, you can't even see what range that axis is or what range that icon is covering. And there's no, there's just no real way of understanding anything. So you hover over stuff and the tooltips just show you what those values are. But you've got the guy with the average of 62 for batting is hugely overlapping Dhoni with his average of about 25. So because the icons are so big, it just completely renders the axis irrelevant, and the same applies down for the dismissal section as well. So I think this is what I didn't want to see. It's the use of icons and graphics that are inappropriate and makes things hard to see. So it sounds harsh, but I would just do away with them. Just do bar charts.
Yeah, and like you said it, bar charts, because what I also don't understand about this is because these icons jump kind of left to right and up and down, why not sort them in ascending or descending order? I don't really understand the current sort order of this, because it doesn't seem to be either the average or the dismissals or alphabetical, so I really don't get it. But it would be really helpful to just have them, like, who's actually the best one here? That's what I'm curious about. I'm like, out of these 5 people, who should I be putting my money on? And then one thing is, there is no data source stated. The author has not put in their name, and there's no indication of whether they have the permission to use these images, where the icons come from. So those are some very basic things people need to get right at this point. So I strongly recommend making those updates as well.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yes. Okay. Just close that. Next is Christoph Bienick.
I think Christoph is watching right now. So
I just see his hello everyone. So great to have you on, and here's a nice simple bar chart. So I'm curious to hear what you think of that one.
Well, I think it's kind of timely that it follows the last one. So the challenge with the last one was the icons were huge, and if there was an axis, you could see that the icons just strayed all over where that axis would have been. This is a bar chart which you can't mistake, and I know sometimes it feels like people feel like they put themselves under pressure to try and glitz stuff up, but in terms of people being able to understand what they're looking at, I think Christoph has basically nailed this. So whilst the title, like you've mentioned on previous ones, maybe doesn't give you quite enough detail. It gives you more than we've had so far. And Christoph's also used this left-hand panel to detail, what is a run, what is a dismissal, what is a batting average. So he's filling in all of those knowledge gaps that people might have about cricket. And then he's gone with a simple dual axis. So we've got the bars for the batting average, and it's sorted again, like you've said on the last viz. So he's giving us data presented in a good way, sorted in a logical way, and then within that we've got the dismissal. So this is the only area where maybe there's a question mark about how readable it is. So we've got obviously it's kind of an unsynchronized, if that makes sense, dual axis, because these little gold bars within the blue bars, or the gold lines, that represents the number of dismissals people have had. So it might be a bit of a challenge for people to understand that within the same bar as the main bar, if that makes sense. But I think it's night and day in terms of clarity compared to the last one.
Agreed, and I'm gonna bookmark this one because it's got explanations on the left, which, while I haven't read them in detail right now, I think they will come in handy when I try to create my own. One suggestion I would maybe make is for the dismissals in the bars, I think white would be a really nice contrasting color, or a really, really light blue, just to make it a bit easier to see. I find yellow or this kind of sand color on blue is a bit difficult to read.
Yeah, I think so. I'm like you, I haven't done it yet, but I've looked at a few, obviously, and I'm kind of thinking that where we have these dual axis ones, I think it is a little bit complicated, but we'll see. I'm sure there'll be more examples as we go, but I think that's a really good example from Christoph of no clutter, clear data, and it's, for me, miles ahead of some of the others that we've seen.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's really nice and clean, and I think it makes the topic for me actually more approachable, because I'm like, oh, okay, now I can compare things. Even if I don't get it, I can at least now compare numbers and I can see something going on. So the top two guys in terms of the batting averages seem to have low dismissals, and then there seem to be more dismissals for the guys with the lower batting average. I don't know if that's related, but at least I can see something that maybe spikes my interest and makes me research more and find out more.
Yeah, and Christoph's commented on YouTube to say actually the colour choice was because of the kit that India wear when they're playing. So it's a logical choice again. So he's explained why he used those colours. So it's a good job.
And I appreciate, so Andy has kicked off a bit of a discussion of, shall we never use cricket data again? And some people say, well, there's a world outside of US sport. And I totally agree. But correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie. I think England or the UK is kind of the only place in Europe where cricket is really popular as a sport that's being played. I think there's, it's not just a US perspective that cricket is maybe a bit tricky to understand. I have to admit, as a German or European, I also find it difficult.
I mean, it doesn't get played that much in Europe. There are some European teams that do it, but there's a huge community of people doing data viz in the subcontinent, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa is huge in many, many places. So that's kind of what it's in.
And I get the sense that our friends who actually join us for Makeover Monday from India, or who are of Indian descent and live in other countries, that they jump at the chance to use this kind of data set. So that's cool. And for those, I mean, maybe I have a strange sense of humor, but there is a video out there called "What Cricket Looks Like to Other Nations or to Americans." Right. Every time I watched it, I cry tears because I find it so hilarious. But people who know cricket find it completely stupid. So if you don't know cricket, you should look it up on YouTube and see what you think. And I do want to, before we get into this one, give a quick shout out to Sam and Max, Michelle's sons, who are watching this Viz Review live with her, and who have been learning a bit of data viz from their mum. So good on you guys. I hope that at some point we'll see some vizzes from you as well. Would love to have them on Makeover Monday. Okay. Now, this is from Marty, and it's a bit similar to the original, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's super similar. So I think the only thing that differs really to the original, so the original had this weird idea of scaling the size of the sort of the image of the cricketer. So it just looked a bit nuts because you had a really big, tall fella and then a little guy. So at least this creates sort of the impression that, all players could theoretically get the average that Kohli did, but actually when you almost look at the footprint of the size within each figure, you can see that they didn't. So I think it's a step better than the original in that respect, but so that's about as good as it gets for me. I still struggle with the idea of using this way of presenting the data, but I guess it's legit. It still has the perks of a bar by doing it this, which I think is a step beyond what the original was.
Yes, I find the colors make me think of baseball or NBA a bit more rather than cricket, because with the just the blue, white, and red. One thing I would say is we've got the names for the different players, but I'm so distracted by the icon, and the icons are always the same. Now, I think what would be cool if you want to stick with the icons if they were actually the silhouettes of that player, because some people might actually recognize it. And I think this filling up of a shape, while it can be gimmicky, here I'm a bit undecided, but it can work quite well when you have a very simple shape. Like you have just a rectangle, like a bar, and it fills up, because this one here has all these like odd parts to it, the bat and the feet and the legs. But I think the filling up works more with simple, very symmetrical shapes in general.
Yeah, I'd agree. But I think that it's better than the original, and at least we can see what y-axis is. So
yes,
good, but not quite right, I'd say.
Okay. Then we have a diverging bar chart from Lisa Rapp. Let's check this one out.
Okay, so this is interesting, because if we go back to Christoph's, we had this dual axis, and Lisa's separated them and got them pinging in the other direction, because they are separate metrics, so it sort of makes sense for me for all of them to be on different axes, and it is totally clear as a result of doing this way. So she's chosen to sort it by the batting average in descending order. A nice info button to give us a bit of an explanation about what these different metrics represent, and actually a really quite a good title, because it's an important thing to say this is how they perform against this type of bowler. So it's a bit more than just saying Indian against left arm pace or whatever it was. So little additions to the title that make quite a bit of difference. I think the one thing I'd ask you is about that background colour. So I'm assuming it relates to the colour of the Indian cricket kit, but do you think it's a bit bright?
I find the blue a bit bright. I think I would either go grey or a darker blue. Again, the colour might have be exactly the RGB code or something of the Indian cricket kit, but I think a darker blue is just a bit easier on the eye, and then the white stands out really nicely, but the background is more background. Why does it say left arm seamers? Is it?
So this is more cricket terminology. So on a cricket ball, you've got like stitching down the middle of it.
Yeah.
And fast bowlers try to throw it so that bit is the bit that lands on the pitch, because it makes it shoot off in all sorts of crazy ways. So they're called seam bowlers. So it's just there's an awful lot of lingo in cricket, like there is in all sports.
As if it wasn't complicated enough. I mean, you've got about 50 people on the pitch. They all wear the same outfit. At least like, literally everyone is dressed in white. I don't even know who's on which team. And then, you just have different names for what they do. But that's fine. I'm always willing to learn.
But I quite like this way of presenting it, though, because you've got these distinct separate axes, you know they're separate metrics, so you're accepting of the fact that actually if we look at Virat Kohli at the top, we can see that his 5 dismissals is more than 5% of the length of the batting average, but we know that's cool because we know they're separate metrics. And I think that was the reservation I had about Christoph's earlier was the fact that you had those 2 different metrics on unsynchronized axes mashed together. I think this forces you to look at them separately. So I think it's a good way of tackling it.
Definitely. And we have a great discussion on the live chat. People saying that they really like that they get to learn about different topics through Makeover Monday because they're kind of forced to. And if you didn't know, you can actually suggest visualizations or data sets. Now, ideally not just, hey, oh, how about this topic? But the best way you can help us is if you find something out there in the wild and you think it needs a makeover, just send us the tweet or the link as a message on Twitter, and we'll put it on our list because we're always looking for new and quirky things. And yeah, so don't hold back if you have any ideas or you come across weird stuff that should be improved.
Yeah, definitely, because I need help every week finding stuff. So yeah, if you can find an article and as long as it's got the data source available, please send it to me.
Or if it doesn't, sometimes like if it shows all the values, if it's a bar chart with all the values displayed and we can type up quite quickly what the values are, that's fine as well. We try for our sanity to keep the data prep on our side to within 30 minutes. And that means, like getting it all to a place where we can publish it for you. But please feel free to become part of that process by making your suggestions. Okay. So this viz is by Vivian Ho, and I have to say, now, my first impression is I really like the design. I love the design of the title with that line, and I do like the figure in the background. Now, in saying that, of course, the dots that represent the data points that are actually the metrics for a person rather than, I think the picture suggests a little bit that maybe it's the location of where someone hits the ball, which it's not. But I think it's an interesting approach or just an interesting design to, how could you lay this out?
Yeah, I intentionally chose this one because I think it's important to show, if you remember the first one we had was also a scatter plot, but it was quite stripped back and there wasn't much context in there. But what Vivian's done is really, she's helped fill in those blanks by she's given details about, why are we looking at this, saying that India's openers are known to struggle against left-arm bowlers. So there's just all that context there to help people understand what they're looking at. And on her tweet, she actually said, I don't know anything about cricket, but the way we've got that figure in the background of the scatter plot's actually quite clever because if you ever watch cricket, and I'm sure everyone will start watching it now, that it's been on Makeover Monday, quite often when you look at, there's a whole lot of data on cricket coverage when you watch it, and they show you where all the bowling deliveries have been pitched relative to the wicket, and this is fairly reminiscent of actually how proper analysis happens in cricket on the live coverage. So indirectly, Vivian's made something which actually ties to cricket coverage as well. So I think it's, again, while the scatter plot might not be brilliant with this amount of data, I think the way she's designed it and given that context is really great, and she's focused on Kohli, giving him a different colour to make him stand out. So I think this is probably about as good as it can get with a data set that's this small.
Yeah, I like I said, I really like the design, and I just clicked on the definitions button at the top right corner, which is really helpful. Thank you, Vivian. I am going to use this as a reference as well for when I finally get around to building my own. Okay, and next up we have Preet, who I think participates every week, basically, right?
He does, yeah. He's had a few favourites as well, I think.
Yes, and I think that's, it's not automatic that you participate every week, you're in the favourites every week or something, and it's also not shouldn't be the goal to always be in the favourites, but I definitely notice when people participate consistently, it stands out and we see their progress. And I actually, maybe another shout out for Michelle. I had a call recently with Bright Talk. They talked us through our stats, which are a bit off the charts. And Michelle was our biggest viewer. She has viewed the most Viz reviews, the most hours on Bright Talk on the Makeover Monday channel out of our 11,000 plus subscribers.
Wow.
Yeah. So there we go.
Is there a prize?
Oh God, there probably should be. I will think of something. Maybe I can send her a copy of my book when it comes out. Yeah, I should do that. Okay. Anyhow, this is a nice, simple bar chart. Now it says openers. Why are we now talking about openers?
Yeah, so This is one that I chose partly because I was confused by that, but I think it does make sense. So in cricket, if you're the batting team, you've got two batsmen on the pitch at the same time. So obviously the first two that are on the pitch are your opening batsmen. So they're called openers. And obviously there's 5 players in the data set, so they can't all be opening batsmen because you can only have 2. So I think, and I'm thinking that Preeth knows cricket and is saying actually Dhawan and Sharma were typically India's opening batsmen. And therefore it becomes quite an important piece of analysis, because he's saying actually if you look at this, the opening Indian batsmen have been dismissed 22 times by the left arm fast bowlers, seamers, whatever you want to call them. So it was almost saying, Christ, is this a problem, because these guys seem to get bowled out quite a lot by this type of bowler. So I think that's why he's used the red colour that he has, and focused on this specific thing. And again, it completely lacks the context of, well, maybe these two have played against this type of bowler 100 times, so actually being bowled out 12 times or 10 times isn't so bad. So it lacks that overall context, but I think it's a nice focus on something specific. I think if I were to change it, I'd consider just make the 12 and the 10 red as well, and maybe make their names red by having a separate sheet with just the player names on rows, and dropping something on colour to call them out, just to really reinforce the fact that they're the opening batsman. But I quite like it.
Yeah, I really love just the simple design and how easy it is to read, even though I still don't understand the topic as such. But yeah, very cool.
Okay.
Okay, I'm really glad that this is your data set and you have to pick favorites this week, because yeah. Hayley Kim is next with rounded bars.
Yes, I guess this one's. Why did I choose this one? Oh yeah, I chose this one because we only had a limited amount of data, and Hayley looks like she's come up with a metric of her own. So we had number of dismissals and batting average, and I think what Hayley's done is multiply the number of dismissals by the batting average to get this overall number of runs scored. So the blue rounded bar is showing actually how many runs in total have these players scored against this type of batsman. So I think everything that we said earlier it's the same as Christoph's, isn't it? Everything applies there, where we've got unsynchronized dual axes, and is it hard to understand how to read those? But I kind of included it just because she tried to pluck out a new metric. But yeah, apart from that, I think everything from Christoph's review applies.
Yeah, I agree. I think I did find Christoph's easier to understand, and it might be the layout, because here I've got the title and the subtitle. Then there's a right aligned text, which I find a bit harder to read than being left aligned, and the rounded bars are really prominent, but then there's those really tiny reference lines with the runs scored, and I just find, well, the batsmen's names, I would prefer them, I think, on a single row.
Yeah.
Plus, I would prefer them kind of, I guess, yeah. Maybe what confuses me is that they're sorted by batting average, but batting average seems to not be so important because it's just a small reference line, whereas there's this really massive blue bar that... hang on. Why is the blue bar for dismissals for Rohit Sharma the same length as Virat Kohli, which is only half as many dismissals? Like he's got 5 dismissals, Rohit has 10. Why are they the same length? And why is 12 shorter than 10? Am I not getting something here?
So the blue bar, I think, is always the total number of runs scored. So the number of dismissals is literally just the value that's shown as like a discrete.
Okay, because I'm confused. When I see a very prominent blue bar like that, I would assume that's how it should be sorted logically. If I sort by batting average, then I think that should be the most visible element.
Yeah.
Or if I sort by dismissals, that number needs to be the most prominent, however she makes it happen. I think my eye is thinking, why are the blue bars not in order, even though the order is determined by something else?
Yeah, no, it is a bit confusing.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Who do we have next on our list? We have
Rajat.
Okay. So he is inspired by a viz by Yvette. Yvette Alexa, I forgot her last name. Yvette.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So this one I chose because it's out there, isn't it? It's
It is out there.
I sort of, I guess in essence it's just a scatter plot, isn't it? But just with everything joined up. And Andy's made a perfectly valid point in the chat saying, actually, these are unrelated metrics now that he's a cricket expert. He probably wouldn't, or it doesn't make sense necessarily to do a scatter plot type of thing anyway. But even if we step beyond that and look at this, I think it's quite complicated to understand these lines like that, because I'm just a bit of a tangle. Can you look at it and interpret it with ease?
No. A viz like that, if I didn't know what the topic was, I would maybe be thinking more about something structural or speed or, not even cricket. Maybe it's mountains climbed in a certain amount of time, where you have time going horizontally and elevation going obviously up or down. I don't really connect this to cricket because the place, like in this two-dimensional space, the location of the data points isn't intuitive for me. I don't really understand how it relates.
I'm struggling. I mean, there's some cleverness. There's cleverness in joining everything up and doing all the shading, but I find it quite complicated.
How can people have negative dismissals?
They don't, and that's the problem with what is going on here. I guess it's a bit skewed because you've got these people who've only got 1 or 5 dismissals, and because this is a bit dodgy. So where you've got that dotted line across the middle is the average dismissals, but that's in the realms of, we're talking about the average of an average, and it's completely uneven playing field because we don't know how many matches this is based on and stuff like that. So that's why it's confusing, and it's similar, I guess, for this vertical reference line as well. It's an average, which you can't really do when we don't know the context of how many games we're talking about.
Yeah, I find that horizontal line, solid line, very misleading. I thought that was the 0 line because it's so prominent. I didn't even look at the axis. So this doesn't really do it for me. It makes it even harder for me to understand this whole topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have
Seamus.
There's a lot of debate about these metrics, whether they are related or not, and what information was available versus wasn't.
Yeah, I've opened a can of worms with this data set. Maybe I should stay away from cricket.
It's fine. It challenges all of us a bit, so that's all good. Okay. Now, what I like in terms of Seamus' approach is he just looks at batting averages. He completely ignores the dismissals, which probably is helpful, and makes it a bit simpler. But then it gets more complicated because of this curved bar chart thing.
Yeah, so we've had these in the past. I just included this just as a point of just reinforcing the message on this. So these sort of fall into the category of maybe they're more visually captivating than a conventional bar chart, but can you even, if those labels weren't there to show the batting averages, could you even make the comparison? Because it's quite confusing. It's where you've got Virat Kohli's average of 100 is going sort of 3/4 of the way around a circle. I think naturally it gets us thinking about clocks and and percentages just because we're looking at that. So you're sort of saying, well, is 100 3/4 of something? So it's a bit complicated in that way of looking at it. And then we've got these different colours for each batsman. I don't know if we necessarily need that. So I'm sure it's scaled based on their batting average, but do we need that? Do we need to encode with sort of tone of colour as well as length? So it's just included for those pointers of generally. I could see why this might be included to try and try to jazz up something, but does it work?
Yeah, good point. And I think going back to a simple bar chart is probably just the right approach here, because it doesn't really need to have that curve that just adds additional complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and let's move on. I also don't think, in addition to the bars or the length, we need the color. And that's okay. Okay, so the next one we have kind of gauges combined with let me click that again, with radial bars, which is an interesting approach.
Yeah, this one I called out because, and again, I quite like this format of us being selective with which ones we can choose, because I'm not a massive fan of the chart type anyway, and I just can't understand how the author has created this in a data set that's only got 10 data points, because there's more sort of spokes on these radials than there are data points. And if I look at it, I honestly can't begin to understand how this is derived, because, so first of all, I can't understand the chart. So if I look at Jadhav's 62 for a batting average, I don't understand how that chart possibly represents the number 62. There's no tooltips to help me.
Oh.
You've got these variable length spines that don't mean anything. I've got Dhoni beneath has got 24.77, but it's less than the 62. But the guy that's got an average of 100, I can't see the relationship between that and the 62.
Well,
it's just strange.
It's really strange. And what I notice is it's always one long bar, then two short bars. So maybe that's just the pattern to display this gauge. But like you say, how, if the highest number is 100, shouldn't that go all the way? Or you have to include some sort of explanation of whatever the highest is. Maybe it's a benchmark of the best player worldwide, or the best player in India, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, out of these 5, why is 100 where it is?
Yeah.
Why is, it's just, it doesn't really make sense. And then the colors reverse on the other side, where suddenly it counts using the light blue or the gray bars. And
and you try to tie the color then into the heading as well. And so like the heading's got gray and it's got like the versus V in red, but that doesn't tie in with the color use in the charts. And then we've got batting averages is red, but then player names are also red. And then you've got dismissal is coloured in grey, but you've got grey stuff in the batting average charts and you've got red stuff in the dismissal chart. It's just utterly confusing. So I think a minimum that needs to happen is for the tooltips to be turned on, just so people can understand what the data points are they're looking at. But I think it's maybe an experiment that's gone a bit wrong. It's incredibly complex and just can't be understood.
Yeah, I agree. And Charlie, there is a discussion now in the chat about who the target audience is of, well, the original plus, our visitors. Now, I would say, sure, there are visualizations and charts and stuff that are very targeted, but in general, anything that's out in public could be seen by anyone, right? So what would you say in terms of the Makeover Monday crowd? Because we can't control where the original comes from and what they had in mind. But for people building these makeovers, who should they consider their target audience?
I mean, it always comes down to personal choice, I guess. So I would always perhaps put yourself in the shoes of actually, I'm presenting this to me. So do I understand cricket? If not, what would I need to have explained to me in order to be able to get the message across about what the data shows? So I think that's always a good place to start from, because I don't think we should always start from a base of zero and say someone doesn't even know what a bat is or what a ball is, because otherwise we'll just have loads of vizzes which are just bogged down in loads of text describing stuff, and we shouldn't need that. So that's how I personally tend to approach stuff. This specific article was on a sports site, specifically on a page about cricket. So you would assume that people aren't stumbling across that. So these are people who understand cricket and are trying to understand what things do India need to consider to try and beat Australia. So on that basis, if I was to go down that approach, I'd probably base it on that and say, actually, this is a knowledgeable crowd, so I just need to present the data in a better way than one that's got big images of cricketers coloured in different colours.
I agree with you. And what I would also say to people is be a bit selfish, because every time you build a viz, it's an opportunity for you to showcase your skills and your knowledge, right? As an analyst or a data visualization person, or just someone who wants to play with Tableau. So if you want this to eventually or soon be maybe a full-time job or your own business or whatever you want to do with data visualization, work on that. Like, use Makeover Monday to build your portfolio. And if your viz is going to be part of your portfolio, think of what would someone need to know who doesn't have much knowledge of the topic, but who I want to impress with my skills and my abilities as an analyst. So if you are eventually going to use your Tableau public profile or whatever tool you use to impress a recruiter or a potential hiring manager, show them that you are able to consider a broad audience. If we're talking about the weather or traffic or, things like food, you can assume that most people know quite a bit of the basics. If it's cricket, you probably need to provide a bit more context because fewer people know about this. And I think if you can show that you're sensitive to those differences in your audience, it's another thing that, ticks a box when they look for someone talented or when you put your work forward. So if Tableau and if Makeover Monday is part of your efforts to build a portfolio for your career, for your job hunts in the future or now, then you want to put more effort in. You want to show that you can research these topics, you can explain them to anyone, that kind of stuff. So I think on the one hand, yes, who are you building it for? But on the other hand, also, what's in it for you? And then who are you building it for as a result of that? Okay, onto this viz, and I forgot who created it.
This is Diego. So I think it's first Makeover Monday. So
welcome, Diego.
So I included it on that basis, and so I think a lot of what we said about the two earlier scatter plots, so we had the first one, whose name I've forgotten, and then Vivian's really good one with all the additional context. I think Diego can probably take quite a lot of that on board. I think one of the reasons I included this one were because there are no axes whatsoever, so it makes it quite difficult to understand anything. So yeah, each data point is labeled, so you can kind of imagine what the axis or the axes would look like. But those were the initial thoughts I had about it. And then I think we've got this challenge of overuse of encoding again. So we've got these circles, they're sized and they're colored, and they've got like horizontal and vertical positioning on an axis we can't see. So there's just an overuse of encoding. So I think Diego said on Twitter that he's just finding his feet and this is his first viz. So I think those are the lessons that I would pass on to Diego, is you don't have to encode with every means possible, size, color, position, and everything like that, because just one of those things is usually enough.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. I will move on to the next viz, and that's from Preeti. Okay, I'm gonna let you start with this one, Charlie. I just have to go on mute for a second.
Okay, so I included this one because it's slightly different. So earlier we had a couple of examples where sort of the silhouette of a cricket player was used and filled in with bars. And those are kind of ununiform shapes. So Eva touched on this earlier with some of her feedback, saying that actually filling those shapes in when it's an ununiform shape is quite hard to interpret. But because Preeti has used a conventional shape, so the rectangular bit of a bat, it works a little bit better, in my opinion. And we've had earlier examples where data wasn't sorted, and in this case is sorted, so we're in descending order by the batting averages. So just because that's been done, it helps the audience understand the data a little bit better. So that's a nice handy thing. And again, this is another example where we've got reasonable context down the right to describe what all these different metrics are. So I think a lot of what we've said for earlier vises applies with dual axis and unsynchronized and stuff like that. But I think I prefer this way of showing things to the outline of a cricketer just because it's a conventional shape.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what I like, so I'm not usually a fan of, icons or images, but at least with this, it's immediately clear, even to me, that it's about cricket. And for those who might not recognize the type of bat immediately, they at least see this is about some sort of sport. So, yeah. Okay. So then we have Thanga.
Yeah.
Actually, the name seems to be Arun Kumar, but goes by a different name on Twitter. So let's have a look at his viz. Ooh, Cardinal Sin, red and green.
Yeah, this was again another cherry-picked one where I saw it and thought, oh, there's quite a bit to pick on here. So in a creative and constructive way. So yeah, red and green, like you said, there's an awful lot of people in the world who've got colour deficiencies, so it's not a great idea to use those colours.
Maybe he used it because red, green, and then at the bottom, this almost white is the colours of the Indian flag.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
would
maybe.
be the only excuse I accept for red and green, if it's your national colours.
But it's an interesting example because we've said through today's review that we can have these radial things and we can have scatter plots, we can have all sorts of different ways of presenting the information, but a bar chart would tend to be clearer. But I think this shows that you can still clutter up a bar chart. So we've got these sort of gimmicky wickets for the dismissals, and I can understand why that's being used, but it just makes things look unprofessional, which is quite scathing. But you wouldn't want to include this in a professional piece of work, and I don't think you'd include that sort of icon even in a bit of a sports publication. It just looks a bit unprofessional. So I think to improve this one, it's a case of actually let's do away with the icons, just be a bit more sensible about use of colour. And yeah, it's not bad to do very simple charts without clutter.
Yeah, the wickets look to me, actually at first I thought it was books and the leaves of what's the tree that has acorns?
Oak tree.
Yeah. That was my first thought, and I'm like, what is this? Why is there books on the bars? Now I see the wickets, but yeah. And somebody criticized me for suggesting this could be the Indian flag because obviously it's orange, not red. Excuse my lack of Indian flag knowledge. It was my first thought of why would they have used this? And when I saw the green and the red and kind of shade of red and the grey, that was what came to mind. So should have known, silly me. Yeah, so okay. Now another thing, so last week I spoke in the lessons learned about typos and really tidying that up, and it is really important. It's really important to me, and I'm never going to get tired of saying that. But have a look at the bottom. Designed by. So the by should be lowercase. Then there is a space before the colon that shouldn't be there. The space should be after the colon. There should be spaces around the pipe. There should not be a space before the colon. And then after the URL, there should be a space before the curved brackets. So, those small things I find very irritating because they look like people either don't pay attention to detail or they don't care about the detail. But as an analyst, you need to, because if people, if you take it back to the work context, if you don't pay attention to small things like that, will people trust that you paid attention to the numbers and the calculations you've used? I just think it really undermines the work that you've probably put into this, or any other viz, because it puts doubt into people's mind.
So in the collection, do you want to skip the next two and move up to Sandeep's?
Sure, let me do that. Sandeep, okay. Oh.
Yeah, so we had a couple in the collection I curated, which were pretty similar to things we've already seen, but this one has an extra layer of feedback available to it.
All right. Wow. I can't even... Oh, is this automatically sized? Because it does... Oh, there's something strange going on. I'm just gonna zoom out. I keep zooming out and it keeps jumping to fill the screen. This must be automatically sized. This is odd.
So, where do we start on this one?
Oh, well, my question is, why is Australia in there?
It was because that was the team they were about to face. So the article was just before India played Australia last year in the World Cup. So at least that's lifted from the article.
Okay, so I'm okay with that, but the title says how India can beat Australia, but I don't get an answer to that question. So how can India actually beat Australia? Like, it tells me nothing about that. It just gives me numbers. Again, there was no attention paid to putting some spaces between the metric and the number itself.
Mm-hmm.
But what does it... So if I'm the Indian coach, who obviously knows a lot about this, but what does this viz tell the coach or whoever cares about it about beating Australia? I don't get the connection to the title.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. And then if we go beyond the fact that we can't necessarily understand it doesn't answer the question. Then we've got this. There's just everything is on here. So
yeah, the
background image is madly bright. It's like really, really distracting. We've got the challenge of red and green. We've got font which is yellow. We've got font which is red. There's like the measure names color legend is off to the right of the chart, and just calling the x-axis, just calling it value. There's lots of it feels quite careless, which it touches on what you said earlier. If everything on your profile is part of your resume, almost your CV of why would I want to give Sandeep a job? I mean, in this one, you'd say, well, if I want to start creating really colourful visits, then maybe Sandeep's the guy for me. But it's quite garish, and it's just very, very busy, very distracting with the use of colour, the use of the background image, throwing everything on one chart. So I think this is one where, some of our feedback earlier today applies. You just got to strip stuff right back and think, am I presenting this in a way which confuses my audience or distracts them? And if I am, what do I need to do to reel it back in and make it a lot more accessible?
Yeah, this is an example where if you literally just take 2 steps back from the screen and ask yourself, be critical with yourself, really challenge yourself and say, firstly, can you read everything that's on the screen? Can you see the data clearly? And here I can't, because there's red text on, for whatever reason, there's a very fuzzy, blurry image of a stadium. There are flags that cover up part of the data. There are pictures of people. There is grid lines, red text, green stuff. Like it's all over the place. And if you step back and look at it with a critical eye, sure, there are, different people have different preferences for design, and that's fine. But I think there is a general consensus on what's readable and what isn't. And for me, this is not readable.
Yeah, I'm with you.
How are you for time? Because we're on the hour. I'm fine,
Yeah.
but
I'm good. I'm trying to see if you scroll quite far up, we've got one, I'm going to say Radi, R-A-D-I.
okay, let me see. Ready? Yeah.
Yeah, give this a go. Because again, all of the others before that were ones we've pretty much seen.
Very much bad chance, yeah.
So, and Radi says it's only the second time I've created a dashboard using Tableau. So bear that in mind.
Okay. So, sorry, what did you say about using Tableau?
Sorry, it's his second time he's done one.
Oh, well done. I have to say, well done on removing grid lines, borders, axis lines, and all those things that are typically there by default. I mean, I know when I first used Tableau, I left all those things on, so it's great to see that he's actually done formatting there, because it's a big step already.
Yes, the reason I include this one was because I was a bit confused by lots of elements of it. So it kind of is reinforcing, is focusing on batting averages, and it's sort of reinforcing using or encoding using size again and again and again. So if you look at the names of the players, they're shrinking. So Dhoni's got a smaller batting average than Kohli has. Then you've got the size of the players, which is possibly hidden on a y-axis, where maybe Kohli's head ends at 100 and Jadav's ends at 62. And then we've kind of got this stacked bar along the bottom. So it's kind of like the same message 3 times. The question is, do we need it 3 times? And I don't think we do.
I don't think so. I mean, I would prefer to actually have all the images. There's a question, are you actually allowed to use them? Because typically, I know that on, what are they called? Getty Images. If you want an image, a picture of a famous person, it's typically $450. So be careful what pictures you use, because while I doubt that Getty is going to sue you, in theory, they probably could. But if you insist on using images and you have permission to use them, I would make them all the same, because I actually want to now see their faces, because these images are good quality ones where they're looking at the camera and I'm like, oh, so that's what these dudes look like. But what I want to know is, why are they the top batsmen? I mean, I'm assuming it's based on the batting average, but can we call them the top batsmen just based on this data that we have? Or is it better for Radi to include, and based on historical performance or whatever, or ranking on some page? I just think, is a single metric, is that enough? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally the thing which makes this improvable is that we've got like a stacked bar along the bottom. It's hard to compare stuff if you've got no common axis to line them up against. So for me, I wouldn't have it arranged like that. I would just do a conventional, have the players on rows and then the continuous metric going along on columns, and then we're cool and we can compare stuff. So I think if I was to recommend one thing to Radi, it would be, just arrange it in a way where you can get a more conventional comparison of the metric.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Who's next? Who else do you want to? Because we've done a lot of bar charts now.
We've done. Let's see if we've got. There's a few where we'd be kind of reiterating stuff. If you want to scroll up to Rohan.
I was just coming across it, so yes. Let's have a look at that one.
Because again, if we refer back to, my hope at the start was, this is a really simple data set. Let's not trip people up. And this again, we've got big background image. There's a learning exercise that these radial bars have been used, and that's cool. But what we said with Seamus earlier still applies. And there's just so much just visual clutter, which is quite distracting. And I think it's the lesson I just wanted to drill into people, and just to say, you don't need to do all this. It's perfectly fine. Just all the effort that you expend here, finding an icon and putting it on there and put a background image on, that's taking you a load of time. But like Andy yesterday, and people should watch on this channel the recording of what he did yesterday. Once he'd taken about 3 hours to get his head around the data, he concentrated on simplifying bar charts. And this is Andy's very, very experienced with Tableau, but he was spending a lot of time finessing bar charts, making it very straightforward and simple. And you can still spend time doing that. And if you compare what Andy produced yesterday with this in terms of simplicity, I think his is more understandable, and you can still, like I said, spend a lot of time making things simple, and that's completely fine. Don't spend a lot of time making things complicated.
I agree, and it comes back to the point I made earlier about maybe this is just your hobby, so to speak, and your job is completely unrelated to data, and no one will ever see these vizzes and judge you for it. But if Tableau or if data visualization is part of your professional career, if you show people a bar chart, a line chart that's super simple to understand and really effective, they can translate that to a business context, regardless of the topic, even if it is the breeding patterns of penguins in Antarctica. But if they look at a viz and they're like, oh my God, this is all over the place, even if it is a business topic like, stock market prices or something, they might struggle to see how that would translate to a business context. So for me, when I build a viz, I typically think, how would I do this at work? Or how would I, how can I continue to improve my skills to tell a better, more effective story that's as simple as possible, as easy to understand as possible? Sure, that means I can't build half the charts that most of you guys are building now, but I will probably never use them in my life. So I'm trying to keep it simple because of the, how I use Tableau. And no one has to do it that way, but just something to consider. If you feel like you have to always outdo what you did the week before, you don't. Like, if someone only ever builds bar charts, we will not judge them for it. We'll be happily embracing that.
Okay, so I think, again, we've got a few sort of duplicate styles going up, but should we end on Ravi, who's this sort of second one on the list you've got?
Yeah, let me go up to that. Dun, 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 dun. It's a yes, and that will be a good one to end on. Andy actually pointed it out to me earlier as a, including very good explanations. So I'll be looking forward to seeing this. Okay, let me bring that back, zooming in. Okay.
Yeah, so this is it's kind of a convenient. It's almost like I planned it, but I didn't. It's like it just bookends the session. So everything we've just talked about reducing visual clutter, make things simple, give context to what these metrics are. Ravi's done it. So we've got distinct separate sections because they are distinct and separate metrics, though I know there's a lot of discussion to say they're not separate metrics, but yeah, that's a discussion for people that aren't me. But Ravi's structured it so you can say, okay, batting average, this is the description of what a batting average is, sorted them in a logical order, which again you referred to earlier, that gives stuff structure so people can make a quick comparison. And he's highlighted Coley and just done a little annotation. It's stating the obvious, but it kind of reinforces that he's got the highest batting average. And then in the dismissal section, he has sorted it in an ascending order, and it makes sense because while we don't have the context of the number of matches that these people have played, the fact that Jadhav has been dismissed only once by this type of bowler is a good thing, whereas Darwan has been bowled out 12 times by this type of bowler, so it stands out. So it's just logical, clear, sorting out stuff with nice context that makes it easy for hopefully someone like you with less cricket experience to understand. And there's no icons, there's no background images, there's no curvy bar charts, there's no radial stuff, there's no just stuff for the sake of it. It's just clean and easy to read.
Yeah, and what I like in particular is the one annotation at the bottom. Dhawan is struggling against left arm pace. That's an insight for me that I probably wouldn't have come to, but that shows me, oh, that's the significance of this high number of dismissals, because when I'm guessing Dhawan is a batsman and there is a left arm bowler bowling to him, he gets a lot of dismissals, right? Is that how I'm interpreting this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this helps me to understand the data and what he's done. So yeah, I like that a lot.
Cool. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up the collection. But I think the lessons came across fairly clear.
I think so. Can I bring us back on the screen? Your screen ready? Okay. I thought I'll ask first. Yeah. I really enjoyed that. I didn't think it would be so engaging for me to talk about cricket visits.
I know this is the thing. I think so earlier in the comments, someone was saying that the joy of Makeover Monday is that variety of stuff, and you know, we've had ones in the past where I think we've had 2 data points a year or 2 ago, and it's amazing the discussion that this stuff can produce and the variety of visualizations. And I think hopefully what we're keen to instill is that people do stuff in a simple way, which is accessible for everybody. So we'll keep throwing variety of data sets at people and hope that that consistent thread of think of things in this way, present it how you like, but please reel in the clutter button.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just shows that, sure, if you have an understanding of the topic or find it easier to understand, you've got a bit of an advantage, but it changes week by week. So I think if people found it difficult this week, don't worry, you will probably not struggle that much next week. And we can all learn from another. Yeah,
and I'll just reiterate that if people want to send us data sets with nice articles, please do. And there's a very good chance that it'll get in.
Yes, and also, you know, I know there's been some suggestions of people, you know, that we need a bit more diversity in the topics, and by all means, you know, play a part of it and send us the topics that you like. I mean, if you think of a topic, like let's say you're really into archery for some, you know, or whatever else, find a topic, find a data set and a viz. I mean, ideally we have that, you know, it should kind of start from the viz because that's what we're making over, but send it to us and we'll happily put it on our list, and then you'll see it pop up. Cool. So I guess that brings us to the conclusion. So I'm going to try to do this properly. Bring up a cover slide. I just need to move it. Okay, so that brings us to the end of Viz Review for week 35.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's September. And yeah, hopefully everyone can use our feedback to get to work on their vizzes, maybe improve, tweak a little bit, and then make sure that you send out a new tweet. Well, it can be just a response to your first one, but with a new picture so we can see what you've changed. And it helps us see, you know, that our feedback arrived and that you found it helpful. And then we'll come up with a new topic next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think this has been the most active chat for sure. There's like hundreds of comments this week. So.
Oh my God, yes. I tried to follow it, but it's really hard to do everything at once. I've got three screens going to control all this, and I still feel out of control. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, Charlie, for joining me, and then we'll be there again next week.
Yep, and then favourites, I think we're back to normal now because neither of us are on a holiday, so favourites should be out Friday or Saturday, and then next data on Sunday, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay,